Yes. So we're going to talk a little bit more about industries. I know industries obviously is a very popular subject on this show, and it's very useful from obviously investment standpoint to sort of be able to break the market into smaller pieces and be able to sort of analyze at a lower level what's going on. So we're going to talk about some tools and ways to sort of help that process. We've got some that exist already that we're familiar with, but there's one that I use that doesn't exist, and we'll go over how to create that. So we're going to see how to create that list and save the list, and then what we can do with the list, and then maybe some scans that'll help us help narrow things down. So the first thing we're going to do, as you're well familiar with, and Tom was just going over this, we can use our popular tools such as the sector summary. This breaks this whole market into sectors and industries in sort of a tree view or sort of a hierarchical view, so we can go in and see what industry groups are within the technology sector or the material sector, healthcare, but we can't see all of them at the same time. So if we go into healthcare, we have no idea what's going on with home providers. So sometimes we want a more of a 30,000 foot level kind of view. And this is useful for being able to sort of dive down into the hot sector, the hot industry, the hot stocks. It's very useful for that. Um, Not quite as useful for getting an overview of all of the industries. As Tom just mentioned again, we have our complete industry view, which does show all the industries, but we still have this overarching sector sort of influence within the view. So even here, we've got them all, but if we wanted to sort of stack rank everybody, this is closer, but still not quite what we need. So there's a way we can do this, and I'm a scan engine guy, so I'm sort of think scan centric. We can use the scan engine to create a group. And this is so easy that if you've got your laptop available and you want to do this, you can probably follow along. It's very simple. We're going to take this existing scan. We're going to get rid of it. We're going to start off and we're just going to say symbol starts with quote DJUS and an end bracket. We're going to check our syntax, make sure we got that all correct. Because we're very lucky in that all of our symbols for the industries are consistent and they start with DJUS. So it's very easy for us to sort of have the scan engine isolate them into a particular group. So I'll just kind of leave that there for a second if you want to follow along and type that in. I believe we may post that into the chat, or you can use the scrub tool to reverse in time during the show and go back and look at that.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
I do want to just interrupt for a second and let you know that the renewable energy actually is DW Cree, but I think that might be the only
exception to the rule.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Okay, good to know there, because there's one other one that will show up that we may not want. So we may have to do a couple little edits, but thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We'll run our scan. And we can see this is pretty much what we'd expect to see. All of the stuff that Tom is always talking about. And he's probably the only one of the few who can recall all these little two-letter combinations for all of these guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to store it in a new list. We're going to get rid of this. Now I'm going to put some of these little asterisks in here. That puts it up to the top of the list, and that's so it's easier for us to sort of demonstrate this and not have you have to look through all of my boring test lists in this account. You can call it whatever you like. We'll call this Dow Jones Industries. Okay, so now we've got a list, and here is our list, stack ranked, of everything throughout the whole industries. Very useful thing. With our summary view, we can do all of our summary sorts of tools. We can go out and say, well, I want to do a 1 month. I want a little bit more scope and time, so we can sort of see longer term performance. We've got our other tools such as the search, which is actually quite powerful in lists like this. So we can say, okay, I know it was DJUSC something, but I can't remember the second letter because only 3 people in the world know them all. So I can type that in and I can get a list of, oh, okay, now I can find, I was looking for gambling, it's CA. Or if you're looking for a particular thing, I'm looking for home improvement or home construction. I couldn't remember which one it is. So you can use that. That little search tool on the summary page can be very useful. So next we're going to do a little trick that I use for most of my lists. And this is very nice, but it's, again, sort of we're in the forest and it's the whole forest and the trees problem. So I'm going to do is I'm come down to the edit screen. Come all the way down because there are a lot of them. And I'll enter a new item in here. And what I'm going to do, this crazy B and end B is what we call an HTML markup. It's sort of the language of the web page, if you will, and it basically will bold this. So it again will help me find this in the list. VTI. VTI is the Vanguard Total Market ETF, which is basically one share of everything, and similar to the S&P 500, but much more presence of things like small caps and mid caps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that. I'm going to go back to my summary view. I'm going to rank by change, and I'm going to be able to scroll down. And there we are, nice and bold, total market. So what this does is sort of brings a little bit of an outside view into this list to sort of give some context to everything. So what I can do now is I can look at this VTI and know that that's basically the general market performance. So what this tells me immediately is everything above this line is outperforming the market. All right, and we'll go back to maybe a 1 month, get a little bit more scope. So everything above this line is outperforming the market, and everything under the line is obviously underperforming the market. So now at least we have some idea of what's good. I mean, if you just took a look at this and you'd said, well, it's down 1%, is that good or not? Well, in 2008, down 1% was actually probably pretty good for a bulk of that year. Maybe 2013 or 2017, not so much. So having this one little item in here and that brings some outside perspective into us can be a little bit of a help to sort of give us an idea of what, again, relative performance is. Like Tom was talking about when we were looking at Goldman Sachs and some of the others, you kind of want to know how this industry is doing relative to the market. Well, if you add this little additional symbol, you can get a view of that. So now we can use this list in a couple of different ways. We can use it to drive some research, like the scan engine helps us find things where we have a concept, but we don't know what we're looking for. We can use that list this way. We can also use it as sort of a confirmation. So how can you use this list as a driving force is to say, all right, I know where my VTI was. I know what the market is. I know that these are the best performing industries over the last month. So now, similar to what we can do with the sector summary, we can go in and find the best industries. We can then take this list. We maybe make a short list. We can see oil popping up a number of times, so we know the energy has been strong. We've got some mining, some maybe materials are looking good. Some energy, oil again, defense, coal. So we can get an idea pretty quickly of where, in this case, the last month, where are the hot spots in the market? Because as somebody said, there's always a hot industry somewhere in the market, even in a down market. So this can be used to sort of direct you in a certain area to start looking for things to find. Now you can then go to maybe that industry group, which allows you to click on an industry and get all the stocks within the industry, like Tom showed us earlier. You can go to the scan engine to then restrict your search to just an industry or a sector and then get some further ideas. But this is another way to sort of get a list of places to start doing some research. We've also got all of our regular list tools, and some of those are sort of corroborating evidence, I would call them. Say, for example, correlation. If you wanted to set up a list of, say, a portfolio, and you wanted to do it with individual stocks instead of ETFs, and you're going to, say, select 25 to 50 individual stocks, you don't want to necessarily choose them all in buckets that are highly correlated, because then when the market goes down, everything you own is going to go down. It's great when the market goes up, but it's not really as defensible as having a mix. So what we can do is say, well, let's go down and look at some of the industries that will zig when the market zags. So we can get down in this area here where there's somewhat less correlation to the total index. And up here in our correlation, our default is the SPX over 20 days. We have multiple time frames. So maybe if we're looking a little bit longer, we can go out for a longer correlation, but we can scroll down here to the bottom area and start to see areas we may want to put some of our chips in that will survive a downturn when most of our high-tech sorts of high-flying stocks may get hit. And you can see a lot of the areas that we would expect, which were sort of bond-type proxies. You've got utilities, real estate trusts, items that will pay a lot of dividends, items that may be considered staples that people will buy no matter what the market's doing. The sin groups here, we've got tobacco and beer. So you can maybe use this to sort of see areas that you would put some things into that you wanted to have a little bit different correlation. We've got seasonality. Again, this is a huge list. I wouldn't recommend that you would probably just go through every single one of these in mass. But like Tom was saying with Goldman Sachs, so maybe I'm looking at buying Goldman Sachs and I want to say, well, I wonder what the industry group does. So maybe I want to go in and see if I can find an industry. I don't know if this is the correct one, but we'll just pick it and say, well, what is the industry doing? Well, maybe, May is coming up. Looks like this one's actually does quite well in May. So maybe this is what I would say corroborating evidence. Like Tom has mentioned, Aaron's mentioned, Gaddis is really big on this. The idea that you want to find a stock that's outperforming its sector and its industry. This will give you sort of an idea of like, well, if I'm going to look at a stock, how does its industry work? Because you may have a case like Goldman Sachs where it's doing well, but it's still not well against the industry. So you may want to see what does its bigger part of its pack do, and something like seasonality will let us go look at that. We've got RRG. We've got a lot of symbols here, so this is starting to get a little bit messy there, but we still can come down to this list and see areas that are moving, sectors and industries that are moving in and out of the various quadrants within the RRG. So this is another place you can do maybe some proactive research and where you want to look further. And then we've got what we say sort of a visual sorting. I was on a couple of times ago, and we talked about market carpets. We can put all of our items here in the market carpet. We can push this out. The summary table is great way of looking at it. It's got specific time frames. So you've got 1 month, 3 month. The market carpet allows you a little bit more flexibility. You can go down to individual days, but you've got about a 3-month range. I can see here very quickly over the last 3 months that in general, the performance of the market hasn't been that great. A lot of red there, not a lot of green. Price is the most common. We won't go into this because we've done it before, but we've got some other areas here we can look at other aspects of items, which is sort of a quick way of doing a visual sort, visual search, visual scan, whatever you want to call it. So that's one method. We can also use this in candle glance. I've got my candle style there. I can then use custom time frame. It would go maybe 6 months. I can add an indicator. Again, we can do something a little bit more broad. We can find ways to sort these. So this is, again, a way we can do a little bit of sorting and searching to see relative performance very quickly without actually getting the scan engine involved. The rest of these are large-scale views. If you've got a lot of time, you want to go one by one through the industries, you can do that. My personal style, I just don't have the time, so I prefer to use these sort of higher visualizations of the industries in general to get a broader view. But you can certainly go through and look at gallery view and scroll through. Like say, you can look for a specific one or scroll forward and back. Again, there are a lot of them. This is not probably the fastest way to go through and look at things, but it's certainly, there's detailed views you can create if you want to do a little bit more research into a very particular industry area. And of course, one of my favorites is the scan engine itself. Now that we've got this group, I can get rid of this guy. I can come down to our chart lists and I can choose my list. And now I've basically restricted all of my scans to this particular list. So I can come in now and do any number of different things that I'm, excuse me, would be interested in a industry view. So I can say, well, let's look at EMAs. I can say, maybe I want to see something where the close is above our 20-day EMA. I know Tom looks at the 20-day EMA very closely, so maybe we want to restrict our list of interesting things to anything where the current close of the industry group, the daily close, is above its 20 EMA. If we're doing this scan daily, maybe we want to change this to crossing because we want to see, has it crossed above its EMA today? So we've sort of, in effect, got a breakout relative to the EMA. So we can run a scan on that. We can find all the things that are crossing above their EMA today because we're having a nice strong day today. So some of these guys, like our internet, maybe these guys are the ones that are starting to take off. Here's our home construction. Tom's talking about the home starts, durable house products, homes, those sorts of things. So this is a way you can maybe find a group there. You can, Aaron uses the PMO. We can look for items that have a PMO signal line crossing the PMO. Maybe they're starting on a new uptrend in terms of the PMO or downtrend. If you're looking to maybe find areas that you want to look for shorting, if you're into that game. Or sometimes what I will do is have an alert, because the alerts are basically driven by scans. If I want to know anytime a sector industry group has a PMO crossing on the downside or the upside, I can create an alert to tell me every day if an item in this list goes up above any sort of moving average, PMO, MACD. You can do MACD centerline test. You can basically do any sort of scan, but limit it just to the industries. So you can keep sort of a very industry focused aspect to your research if that's the way you want to go. So that's sort of my demo on the Swiss Army knife of industry. So everything is based on creating this list. And then once you have this list, you can use it in all sorts of different ways.
Wow. I don't even know what else to say. Wow.
I was hoping I could be able to tell you one thing you didn't know about industries, because I know you spend a lot of time working with the industries.
Well, I didn't realize you could do so much in the chart lists with these industry groups. And especially, I thought the correlation was really fascinating. And when you stretched it out to like a year, one of the things that I look at in a bull market is the rotation. I mean, sometimes the rotation we talk about, from day to day or week to week, but I'm talking about longer term rotation. I mean, if you look back, for instance, at just say consumer discretionary in general, that sector really struggled for a while during the bull market. It just really started to pick up in the latter part of 2017. And so just following the correlation going back a year, if you go to the bottom and look at some of those groups, I mean, I agree with you. I think the REITs, the utilities, when you're in a bull market, those are going to be areas that are going to underperform. But a couple of them, like the media agencies, which is DJUSAV, that's like fifth from the bottom, sixth from the bottom. That's a group that I'm actually keeping an eye on and been watching. And there are a couple stocks I mentioned earlier. I think when I did the media agencies, I did Interpublic Group, which is IPG, being one of the areas of strength within that group. And if you start to see that group take off, those are the types of stocks you want to be in. I didn't realize you could put all of them in here and do the correlation like this and identify those areas of the market. And I have one question for you on that. Up
Sure.
at the top where it says to show or hide certain things, can you bring up in this chart list the sector?
Not well. See, in correlation view,
not in correlation, but
in
I think
summary.
it's summary.
Yeah, we don't really have. It's an area. It's kind of interesting. The indexes themselves, we don't put into the concept of sectors. Although this is like the one place where it kind of makes sense. I mean, I have the sector and industry hidden in this particular view. But yeah, that would be an interesting idea.
Under that show hide columns, I would could you pull up the sector there?
Yeah, it would be empty. We don't really attach sectors to the indexes. Although this is probably the one place where it's pretty obvious, because a lot of times you'll get indexes that can kind of span, if they're aggregates or whatever, it can get a little tricky. But a lot of these, probably we could try and take a look, because I agree that it would be very useful.
The thing I was thinking about there is if you could sort by the sector and then look, well, you don't have the correlation on here though. Okay, never mind.
Right. It's right.
So if I could sort it by sector, and then within the sector, if I see a sector like consumer discretionary that's starting to make the breakout and starting to look better on a relative basis, and then I could sort it and get to the industry groups within that have maybe had a negative correlation that are starting to make a rebound, that would be pretty interesting. I mean, we can do it. I can do it. That's basically what I do when I'm looking at these different industry groups relative to the S&P, but it's not something that would be in that chart list.
Right.
Yeah,
As always, Go ahead, Aaron.
Oh, we got a lot of questions, and I know we go over this like a lot, but
Mhm.
people are wondering, you get in here, how do you find out the stocks that are within that industry? Is there an easy way from this view?
Not from this view. Again, we've sort of created a list that's specific to us. So there would be generally no way that the list code would say, okay, I know that this is an industry, so I'm going to automatically create a link to the industry group. It's sort of a two-step thing. What I would have to sort of have people do is say, okay, the retailers index, or whatever, USGT, I would come over to my summary and I would look up GT, and I find that it's in consumer staples or whatever. So, if you have two tabs open, you can do it, but that's at this point probably the easiest way. There's no very quick way to make that link
From this view? Because I
from this
know if we go to
view.
the sector summary, you can
Right.
kind of move
Mhm.
through there.
Right.
That's we always show everybody, but everybody
Exactly.
still asks the question every single show.
Yeah, we sort of like carved our own little tool here, so it's not quite as integrated to the rest of the tools, as if it were its own standalone tool. And maybe it's important enough that someday we turn it into its own tool.
This was really fascinating because again, I think sometimes, I spend a lot of time in the site, and I did not realize you could do all of this, which is pretty fascinating because that's a lot of information you just showed us, and really appreciate it, Bill.
Yeah, that's I when I started kind of digging into this, because we had done that show, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, about just writing a quick scan to do outperformance, finding an industry that outperformed. And I started thinking, every time I thought, oh, you could do this and you can do this. So yeah, there is a lot that you can do here.
Very cool. Well, we certainly appreciate your time. Thanks for stopping by, and always a pleasure to have you on the show and showing off some tips and tricks at Stock Charts.
Great. Thanks, guys.